Good day, grade 11 learners. Welcome to the Life Science lesson. My name is Shabnam Sugnandan. This lesson is brought to you by the Sci-Bono Discovery Center in collaboration with the Gauteng Department of Education. Good day, learners. Today's lesson is going to be about the human nutrition, ingestion, and digestion. The first thing that you need to know are some of the concepts relating to nutrition, such as the accessory organ. Now, an accessory organ are organs that actually lie on the other side, the mainstream of the digestive system. You have other organs that are not directly attached to the main system. That's why it's called an accessory organ. Accessory organ aids in the alimentary canal to perform its digestive function. In other words, these organs assist the main digestive system to perform their functions. Now, what are some of the accessory organs? It's like the tongue, the teeth, the salivary glands, the pancreas, liver, and the gallbladder. We will see this very nicely in the actual torso of the digestive system. The first accessory organ is the liver, and you should know that the very important thing is that the liver is the largest organ in the body. Yes, it's very large. The liver is a large organ, and where does it lie? It lies just below your diaphragm. In other words, if you go just beneath your rib cage, just beneath your rib, above the stomach, that's exactly where your diaphragm is. And then you find that the liver is lying just below that. And it's covered by the stomach. So your stomach actually covers your liver. Then the liver itself is made up of two lobes. You can see lobe 1 here and lobe 2. So they're made up of two large lobes, right? These lobes have actually two ducts, a hepatic duct, right? And it has a common bile duct, which we also call the cystic duct. But for your knowledge at school, you don't worry about the cystic, you know it as a common bile duct. We'll see why it's common later. So here's your bile duct, which is linked to your gallbladder. Now remember that your gallbladder actually is the one that stores bile. Your bile is manufactured by the liver and stored here. Can you see? It's like an organ on its own, the gallbladder and the liver. It's not attached to the mainstream of the digestive system. So remember what we learned in this slide, that the liver is the largest organ. It's covered by the stomach. It lies below the diaphragm, right, and underneath the stomach, or just below the stomach. So it's more in the abdomen. Remember, learners, we have a head, neck, thorax, and here's your abdomen. So your liver is lying on your right hand side, just below the stomach, right, below your diaphragm and below the stomach. So that is where your liver is. Now let's look at more things about the liver. The liver is the one, if you eat poisonous food, the liver is actually known as a detoxifier. Remember that, right? So let's look at the main functions of the liver relating to digestion. First of all the glucose that you eat, all the carbohydrates, your cold drinks, your chips, your bread, your pap that you have, rice, everything has carbohydrates, right, which is made up of your glucose molecules that you learned in grade 10. Now, if we eat too much of glucose, that excess glucose cannot be lost because you don't know whether you're going to have food the next day. So the body doesn't discard the excess glucose. Once it's absorbed, it travels by the hepatic portal vein from your intestines to your liver. You can see there's a portal vein here. That portal vein is coming from your intestines, right, and is going to your liver. And what does it do? It transports all our excess, all our glucose to the liver. So the liver is going to get its glucose, right? Now the extra glucose will be stored in your liver as what we call glycogen. Right, so the liver stores glycogen. It also stores iron. Iron is needed to carry your oxygen in your blood. So glycogen is where the excess glucose is stored. So if you are fasting, for example, you haven't eaten food, let's say for 40 days, how does your body still get its energy if no glucose is coming in? The body actually takes the glycogen and breaks it down back into glucose. So excess glucose is stored in the liver as glycogen. That's a very important fact. Second point, it deaminates excess amino acids which forms urea that is excreted by the kidney. Very important word is the word deaminate. Now it comes from the word amino acid. So if you break down an amino acid, you're going to get what we call urea. Now remember children, urea also forms uric acid when it reacts with hydrogen. And if you do not drink enough water, that urea and uric acid becomes hardened, and when it gets to the kidney to be excreted in your urine, it will harden to form a stone which we call it's going to be called like kidney stones, and that can affect your kidney. It can also accumulate all the bile pigments, also accumulate with the uric acid to form these kidney stones. So remember, the liver breaks down excess amino acids to form urea. Urea is a waste product. That's why it must go to the kidney to be filtered out in your urine. Deamination means breaking down extra amino acids. Where does amino acids come from? It comes, remember, from your proteins. So in your previous lesson, you learned that amino acids form proteins. Now all your meat, chicken, fish, eggs, those are all proteins. So if you're going to have like, let's say 4 chops today, another chicken, and then you have another, for example, beans, all those lentils, everything forms protein. So you cannot be having too much of protein for the day. So the extra, when the protein is broken down to amino acids, if your body needs, for example, only 200 molecules of amino acids, but now 1000 amino acid is coming, it means 800 amino acids are extra. So the liver will break that excess amino acid. Part of it forms glucose and the rest of it forms urea, which will be excreted into the kidneys. So it's responsible for deamination of excess amino acid. First function, excess glucose stored as a form of glycogen. Second function, responsible for deamination to form urea to be excreted by the kidney. Right. The third thing that the liver does, it detoxifies harmful substances such as drugs and alcohol. So remember, if you drink a lot of alcohol, if you know of someone who's an alcoholic, their liver, they die of liver cirrhosis. The liver starts shrinking because it's having a hard time every day. It's trying to make the alcohol, which is a poison, less poisonous. So it's a detoxifier. Remember, something that's toxic is poisonous. So this makes it non-poisonous. But by doing that every day, the liver is actually getting damaged. Remember, we cannot replace the liver like a car part. Okay, you cannot say, I'm going to go to the shop and buy myself a new liver. Remember, those organs are there from the time you're born until you die. So if we don't look after our liver, it means you're giving your liver a very hard time to actually produce, to detoxify, right? The fourth function is that it produces bile, which is a green pigment. That's why it's found in the gallbladder. It's a green pigment, and bile is very, very important to allow the food to move easily in our intestine. So bile is like a liquid. It's very, very bitter. It's very, very alkali, and it's needed. It's made by the liver, stored in the gallbladder, so that when you eat acidic food, the gallbladder squeezes out the bile into your stomach and neutralizes the acidic food. Okay, so here is the liver, and what's the 4 main functions quickly? Stores excess glucose in the form of glycogen. Deaminates excess amino acids to form urea to be excreted by the kidney. Detoxifies harmful things such as alcohol and drugs. So if you're taking drugs, it's also going to damage your liver. And it also produces what we call bile. Right. The next thing that we look at is that the liver produces bile. And what is bile? It's a yellow-green liquid, right? So it's produced here. You can see this gallbladder is like yellow-green. Produces a yellow-green liquid stored in the gallbladder. A bladder always stores something temporarily until it's being released into the duodenum of the small intestine. Now, your teacher would show you on the actual torso the different parts of the intestine, like your duodenum, then your jejunum, then your ileum, which is the longest part of the intestine. Okay, so for this slide, all you need to see is that the liver is very large. It has 2 lobes, and it has a gallbladder. That's very important, and that's what you need to know. Now here we have a little bit something more about the liver. Remember, now we're going to talk about the actual bile manufactured in the liver. What does bile do? What is bile? Why must the body produce bile? Bile is responsible for emulsifying large fat globules into small fat droplets, which aids in digestion. So, for example, if you are eating something that's very fatty, like if you're having, for example, cream cakes, the cream itself has a lot of fat, which and you know, fat cannot just be washed off easily from the hand. They're very large molecules. They must be broken down into smaller little parts for it to be absorbed. So what the bile does is it emulsifies it. It makes your fat from a blob into a liquid, like liquefies it, okay? So that is what we call emulsifies large fat droplets into large globules into fat droplets. Then emulsification of fat refers to the breaking down of fats into droplets so that the enzymes can work better on a small droplet of fat instead of a big fat globule. So it emulsifies fats. Just think of butter when it's very, very hard, and then now you take it and leave it in the sun and it becomes fluid-like. So in the same form, the bile emulsifies your fat globules into droplets so enzymes can work better. The next thing that bile does, it neutralizes the acid which comes from the stomach. A lot of people have gastric reflux, and you'll see on TV they advertise Gaviscon, right, citrus soda, where sometimes you eat food and you get a heartburn. You feel like a burning sensation in your chest. Now all the acid comes up. That acid is coming up from the stomach, and that can actually create a hole in your stomach and create a hole in your esophagus if it's constant and every day. But now, when you eat food, instead of the acid, acid will kill the germs, but now the acid can't eat up your stomach wall, so the bile actually goes and neutralizes. You know that acids and alkalis neutralize each other. When you pour an alkali into an acid, they neutralize each other. So the bile, which is the alkali, will neutralize the acid that comes from the stomach so that it doesn't eat away the wall of the stomach. Bile promotes peristalsis in the small intestine. That means you need for your food to move down, for your food to move easily down your small intestine. The bile is like a fluid medium. It helps to push, it makes the food slippery so that it can move easily when the muscles contract and relax. So this contraction and relaxation to allow the food to move easily, the bile assists in it, so it promotes it. Otherwise the food will be very dry, it's going to be very difficult to move down. It also acts as an antiseptic, which prevents decay of the food particles in the small intestine. In other words, sometimes when we eat food, the food, if it stays for a long time, if you don't go to the toilet to pass out the undigested food, and if it stays for a long time, it can become septic in your intestine. But bile ensures that the food does not become rotten in the intestine. It does not decay. So let's summarize the 5 main functions of bile. It emulsifies fat globules into fat droplets. 2, it neutralizes the acid food from the stomach. The acid food is called chyme in the stomach. It actually neutralizes it. It promotes peristalsis in the small intestine. And then it acts as an antiseptic. The fifth one goes with the first one, and that means that when the bile makes the fat globules into fat droplets, the purpose is for the fat droplets to be easily broken down by enzymes. But that is another function. So the four main functions, I would say, is to emulsify fat globules into fat droplets, neutralizes the acid chyme from the stomach, promotes peristalsis in the small intestine, right? And it acts as an antiseptic. It prevents the food from decaying in the small intestine. So here's your liver. You can see your hepatic portal vein comes from the small intestine. Here's the bile duct. That is how when you have acid food and the minute food goes into your stomach, it will stimulate the gallbladder to secrete bile. The bile goes like this from the gallbladder, and then it comes into your small intestine and pour it into the small intestine, because the food that leaves the stomach, remember, is very acidic. So as the food leaves the acidic stomach, the bile will neutralize that food. Another accessory organ that's not directly attached to the mainstream digestive system, another accessory organ is called the pancreas. You're going to learn about this again, learners, in grade 12 when we speak about glucose control. So please, when you're talking about the pancreas, pay careful attention, because you'll need this background knowledge in grade 12. So let us see. Now, just behind, right, a little bit behind and below the stomach, here you can see it looks like this, but now, just behind your stomach is also your pancreas, okay? Here's it. It looks like a little island, like a leaf. That's the pancreas. It has a little structure here called the islets of Langerhans. So here's your pancreas. This is your islets of Langerhans in here, right? And that's going to secrete hormones, which you're going to learn in grade 12. So in your pancreas, you have your islets of Langerhans, and they're going to secrete what we call insulin and glucagon, which you'll learn more about in grade 12, right? And glucagon. And they, what do? They control your glucose levels. So they'll control your glucose levels. So your pancreas is the main organ that's going to control the amount of glucose you have in the blood. If it's too much, then the pancreas will secrete the hormone insulin to take the extra glucose and convert it into glycogen and store it where? In the liver. So who is responsible for converting excess glucose and converting it to glycogen? Is insulin. And where does it come from? The pancreas. And where is it stored? Liver. So you see, the pancreas and the liver are actually interrelated. They have a connection. When the pancreas detects that there's too much glucose, then insulin will convert the extra glucose to glycogen and send it by the hepatic portal vein to the liver, and it's stored, right? And then when you don't have enough glucose, the pancreas will detect that, and then what it's going to do? It's going to secrete glucagon, which will convert your excess glucose that was stored back into glucose. Where was it stored? In your liver. So the pancreas works in conjunction with your liver. So here's your pancreas, right? It's regarded as an exocrine and an endocrine gland. We're doing the digestive system, and you'll see that the pancreas has a duct here. Now, there's a duct that goes in the pancreas that goes into the small intestine like this. So this pancreas also secretes pancreatic juice, which contains enzymes. What is an enzyme? It is a molecule responsible for breaking down a substance from a complex form to a smaller form, from a protein to an amino acid, from glycogen to glucose, from fats to fatty acids and glycerol. So enzymes break down substances from large molecules into smaller ones so that they can be absorbed. So what is this slide telling you? It's telling you that there's your small intestine here. That's the duodenum. It's coming from your stomach. Here's your esophagus. Here's your stomach, right? And then this is your duodenum here. You see, like that. So here's your gallbladder, and here's your bile duct, and it's going to pour its secretion of bile into your duodenum. And this pancreatic duct also pours its secretion into the duodenum. So the minute the acid food leaves the stomach, that acid food will be neutralized by the bile juice and pancreatic juice, both of which are alkali. So now that we said that, let's look at it. The pancreas is a large gland which lies in the loop of the duodenum, below the stomach, and then just where that small intestine leaves the stomach, then just there in that loop, that's where you have the pancreas. So if you're going to become a doctor one day, or a gastroenterologist, and you're going to dissect or cut up people, you need to know where the pancreas is. If they're having pancreatic cancer, you need to know where to look for the pancreas. Okay, below the stomach, in the loop of the duodenum, I find that leaf-like gland. That's my pancreas. Above that is my stomach. On the side of it is my duodenum. So you need to know that. Above my stomach is my liver that covers it. So these are important to know, the positions of these accessory organs. So let's look at the slide here. At the slide, a large gland lies in the loop of the duodenum. Specialized cells called the islets of Langerhans, that's found in the pancreas. They secrete the hormone insulin and glucagon. Very important for next year. And they control the blood sugar level. The blood sugar level, I will put it in inverted commas. You cannot use the word blood sugar in an exam. Remember, the blood sugar they're referring to here is actually glucose. That's the blood sugar. So insulin and glucagon control your glucose level. Where is insulin and glucagon produced? In your pancreas. They control your glucose levels. Where do they store the excess glucose? In your liver. If you want glucose, where are you going to get it from? You break down the glycogen from your liver. Okay, so you'll learn more about that next year on the controlling of glucose. For this year, you need to know that the pancreas is the one that secretes the two hormones, insulin and glucagon, to control your glucose level, and it's controlled in the blood, and the liver, it plays a function in storing the excess glucose. Right. Now the pancreas, what does it do? We said here is, now you can see all the accessory organs fitting into place. Here's your liver, right? Here's your liver. Here's your pancreas, okay? Lying in the loop of the duodenum. The duodenum is not an accessory organ, it's a mainstream of your digestive system. The liver is on the side. The pancreas is on this side. The gallbladder is part of the liver. They're accessory, right? So that's the pancreas there. That's the liver. That's the gallbladder. There's the ducts pouring their secretions into the duodenum. That's the pancreas pouring its secretion into the duodenum. Né? So let's see. What do we need to know about pancreas in digestion? In digestion, pancreas secretes pancreatic juice, which contains enzymes. And the enzymes will break down carbohydrates, okay, like your starches. Then it's going to break down your proteins, and it will break down your lipids. Another name for fat is lipids in the small intestine. And because the pancreas secretes enzymes, it's called exocrine. Now, how can you remember exocrine? Exocrine has the letter X, and enzymes has the letter Z and Y. X, Y, Z. So remember, exocrine glands secrete enzymes, whereas because the pancreas is also regarded as an endocrine gland because it secretes hormones. What were they? Insulin and glucagon. So remember what we know about the pancreas. It lies in the loop of the duodenum. It's an accessory organ. It is endocrine because it releases two hormones, insulin and glucagon, which control your glucose level. The excess glucose is stored in the liver. The pancreas is exocrine because it secretes enzymes that breaks down your fats or lipids, proteins, and carbohydrates. So that's very important. Now let's look at the 5 steps. So when we eat food daily, we eat, but we don't realize after we eat what is happening to that food. What is the pathway? What happens to the food after we eat it? Our eyes are there, we are hungry, we're eating crisp all the time, we're eating this all the time. What is happening to the food? First of all, food must come in. Into the way? Mouth. So the mouth is responsible for ingestion. So the minute you take food and put it in the mouth, that is called ingestion. Right. Now the food must move where? From the mouth down your esophagus. We're going to see what's the esophagus just now. It's a food pipe. The food pipe will take the food down to your stomach, okay? So you have here your mouth, right? Here's your mouth there. And then you have your food pipe here. You have your salivary glands at here. Just below your tongue, you have salivary glands which secrete saliva. Your spit is called your saliva. It contains an enzyme that breaks down carbohydrates, okay? So now when you're eating bread, chew bread, it's starch. It doesn't have a taste. But chew it for a long time. You'll find that the bread becomes slightly sweet. It wasn't sweet at first, but if you chew it, it becomes sweet because suddenly in the mouth now, the digestion occurs. And in the mouth, there is what we call saliva. Okay? That saliva has an enzyme which breaks down the starch in the bread and rice into what we call maltose. Okay? So it becomes slightly sweet. Okay, children? Then that's the first part of digestion, breaking down of food. From there, the food goes into your small intestine, where it's further broken down, further digested, then absorbed. After the food is absorbed and goes into the blood to the liver, the remaining food that's not absorbed must be removed from the body. This is called egestion. Egestion means it moves out of the body. Where? Through the anus. Okay? So we have a mouth, and then right at the end, we have your colon with the anus. We will see that in the rest of the pictures. So the 5 main steps are taking food in. Food must be broken down, digestion. Once it's broken down, it's absorbed. After it's absorbed, whatever remains must be removed out of the body. Whatever is absorbed must be used by the body now to build us, to form new hair, nails, blood. So all the food we eat and the water we drink must be used for us to function. So the food that we eat and it's now used, it's called assimilation. So for example, you say, I'm going to take my vitamins, right? Because my vitamins will make my bones strong. So the vitamins, the vitamin D you take, the calcium you take, the calcium you take, the iron from the spinach, it's going to form part of your blood. The calcium you drink in the milk forms part of your bones. So you drank it and you ate it, and now when it forms part of your bones and helps you to do work daily, that means now the food is becoming useful. That is called assimilation. So let's see, it's ingestion, then digestion, then absorption, then egestion, and then assimilation. Make little mnemonics for you to remember. Ingestion, digestion, so IDA, and then EA. Ida, idaya. So I, ingestion, D, digestion, then absorption, then egestion, then you have assimilation. Right. Okay. So let's look at it again. It's ingestion, digestion, absorption, right? After the food is absorbed. Now, after the food is absorbed, 1 minute, after the food is absorbed, ingestion, digestion, and then you're going to have your absorption. What is absorbed is going to be used, that's assimilation, and what is not used will pass out of the body, that is egestion. So ingestion, taking food in, you break down the food by enzymes, you absorb what you broke down, you use what you absorbed, and what remains is egested. Okay. Then now ingestion. Where does it occur? In your mouth. So here is your mouth. Okay, learners? And you find in your mouth, what do we have? Your teeth. Right? You learned last week. In the previous lesson, you learned about the dentition, the teeth. We have 32 teeth. And the teeth has the hardest part of your body is not your bone. The hardest part of your teeth is the enamel of your teeth. Your enamel of the teeth is considered to be the hardest part. Okay, your teeth, remember, every day you are crushing things, every day. So when you crush food and bite food and chew food, we call that mechanical digestion. So in the mouth now, first of all, there's ingestion. Taking in of food through the mouth cavity. Here's the cavity, the opening. Pieces of food are bitten off, so you bite food with your teeth. And then when you're chewing the food, it's called mechanical digestion. So you must first break down the food so it's small, because enzymes are very, very small molecules and they cannot work on a big chunk of something. Something has to be very small, so the little enzyme, which is like a dot, can work on a dot. A dot cannot work on a huge big rock. Okay, it's very difficult. It can break it down little, but if a small little thing attacks a small little thing, you're going to get enough digestion. So remember, in the mouth, what do we know about the mouth? Food is taken in, it's called ingestion. Food is bitten or chewed, it is called mechanical digestion. What is the importance of food to be chewed? So that the enzymes are able to break down that food even better. What is the breaking down of food called? Digestion. Taking in of food, ingestion. Right. Now you have another, you're looking at the two types of digestion that you're going to get. Now in the mouth, you have mechanical digestion. It doesn't involve enzymes, right? That is the chewing of food. But I did indicate that in the mouth, there is two types of digestion. Remember the mouth, there's two digestion. One is mechanical, brought about by what? By the teeth, by chewing, to break it into small pieces. Once the food is broken down into small pieces like your starch, then that food is going to be broken down by enzymes from your saliva. And that is called chemical digestion. So the minute you speak about chemical, you talk about enzymes. And the enzymes in the mouth come from what we call your saliva. And the enzyme in the saliva, let me just see, your saliva, ne? Saliva. Your saliva has an enzyme called salivary amylase. So now we're talking everything about the mouth. Let's see the mouth. Let's look at the mouth again. Here's our mouth. Here's our teeth, mechanical digestion. Here's your tongue, which helps to move the food around so that you can chew the food. Another name for chewing of food is called mastication. Children, remember that the teeth is involved in chewing. You're going to come across these words later. And another name for chewing is called mastication. Mastication, chewing. So who pushes the food around? for you to chew it properly, to break it into small pieces, is the teeth. What kind of digestion is that? Mechanical. It must come in the exams. Your June exams must talk about chewing as a form of mechanical digestion. Another name for chewing is mastication. Why must food be broken down? So enzymes can work better on it. When enzymes work better on it, what type of digestion it is? Chemical. Chemical because it's enzyme. Enzyme is a chemical. In the mouth, when is chemical digestion occurring? Chemical digestion occurs because the salivary glands produce salivary amylase. Amylase breaks down starch into maltose. Okay. So now let us look at now the stomach. Now the stomach is not an accessory organ. It's part of the mainstream of the digestive system. So we can say physical digestion because muscles are involved now. Muscles. Now there's no more the teeth like chewing the food, not mechanical. Mechanical is also called physical digestion, right? Teeth or muscles are involved in grinding something, making it smaller. So remember, learners, your stomach has muscles, muscles that you can't control of, involuntary muscles. And these contract and relax all the time. And they mix food. We call it churning. Ne? So your stomach here, can you see how your stomach muscles are churning? They're contracting and relaxing, contracting and relaxing. And they are mixing the food with the stomach juices, the hydrochloric acid of the stomach. And the stomach juices, ne? They also contain enzymes that break down your proteins and your fats. So in your stomach, this is what's happening. Your stomach walls are contracting and relaxing, churning and mixing the food. You see? 3 layers of muscles, twist and turn, churning action. What does it do? It helps to mix the food with your stomach enzymes. With your stomach enzymes. Enzymes, okay? So that's the churning action. You can see there's a pyloric valve and there's a cardiac valve. So we have here a little valve called the cardiac valve, and we also have a valve here which we call the pyloric valve. So the cardiac valve, because it's close to the heart, controls the food that comes into the stomach. And the pyloric valve controls the food that moves out of the stomach into the duodenum. The first part of the intestine that leaves the stomach is called the duodenum. It's part of what we call the small intestine. Why is it called small? It's so long and folded, but it's called small because it's narrow. So this is the first part. It's called the duodenum. And also remember that your pancreatic duct and your bile duct will commonly pour the alkali juices into the duodenum. When the acid food leaves the stomach, then it's going to be neutralized in the duodenum. So this slide is telling you that physical digestion occurs during mastication. What we said mastication is, it means chewing. Physical or mechanical digestion occurs when the stomach walls contract and relax, and they're going to push the food down. The pushing of the food down by muscular contractions in the stomach is called peristalsis, a very common word that will be tested in the exam. Muscular contractions in the digestive system that pushes the food down and allows the food to mix with enzymes. It's called peristalsis. There's a lot of words. You must associate the word with the action. Muscular contractions that push the food down. Peristalsis. Mixing of the food in the stomach by muscular contractions. Churning. Okay? Breakdown of food by teeth and by muscles. Physical or chemical, physical or mechanical digestion. Breakdown of food by enzymes. Chemical digestion. Mastication is chewing, grinding or crushing the food, making them into very, very small pieces. Peristalsis. What did we say? Here is a diagram of peristalsis. Okay, now when the food that you eat, so if you're eating a sandwich and you're chewing the food in your mouth And if you take that food out, it forms like a little ball. You'll notice that if you're chewing something in your mouth and suddenly you find maybe you can feel like a stone in the food. So as you're chewing and mixing it, grinding it and chewing with your teeth, mixing it with your saliva, and then suddenly you find there's a little like hard thing in your food and you want to spit it out. This is natural. This is what happens. When you take the food out, it looks like a little ball. We call that ball of food the food bolus. Food bolus. Right. Food bolus or bolus of food as it's written here. Right. And that little ball allows it to move easily down your food pipe. You see, this is your food pipe. It's called the esophagus. Common name to explain the pipe or tube leaving the mouth to go to the stomach, transferring food or food bolus from the mouth to the stomach. That is called the esophagus, and that's the food bolus. So the muscles contract, the circular muscles will contract above, the longitudinal muscles will relax, and they contract and relax, and push the food down to the stomach. So this is what peristalsis is. What is it? It's a muscular contraction that pushes the food down. All right? And it's actually what causes, the minute the food is in your mouth, already peristalsis will start. It's preparing for the food to go down. Even if you stand on your head, so even if you stand upside down, your food won't move towards your legs, no. Your food will still move from your mouth into your intestines, okay? So you find that even if you're standing upside down, it doesn't mean your food is going to go down again through your mouth. It's still going to go this. So if you're standing upside down, your food will still go into your intestines. It won't go backwards into your mouth. So because of the muscular contractions, which is very important. Digestion, mechanical. You can see here the food bolus like a round ball. You can see from there it's moving down and down as the muscles are pushing it. And this is called mechanical digestion. So the peristalsis is the circular muscles above the esophagus, circular muscles here above the bolus. They contract, which narrows. They contract and narrows. And the circular muscles under the bolus will relax. So it contracts and relax and pushes the food down. The circular muscles under the bolus relax and the esophagus widens, forcing the bolus down. You don't need to know which side is contracting and which part is relaxing. No. All you need to know is that if you see a diagram like this, it's showing you muscular contractions during peristalsis. That round part is a food bolus. It ensures that your food moves from your mouth to your esophagus, to your stomach, from your stomach into your intestine, into your large intestine, and what's not digested and absorbed will be moved out through the anus, which is called egestion. So here's peristalsis. And remember, what did we say aids peristalsis? It's bile. All right. Now we go to chemical digestion. Okay. I told you that chemical digestion got to do with enzymes. Okay. Chemical digestion is the breaking down of large food compounds into smaller food compounds using digestive enzymes. Example, a protein broken down by an enzyme called protease into amino acids. Okay. Most food particles are too large to be absorbed from the alimentary canal into the blood, and therefore chemical digestion is necessary. I mean, just look at your blood capillaries, your blood vessels, and think of a big sausage that you're eating or a chops. Can a chops actually move through your blood vessels? No. Can a whole slice of bread move through your blood vessels? No. It's too complex. So we need to break it down into the smallest part so that our intestines absorb the nutrients and send it to your liver, from your liver to your heart, from your heart it's pumped throughout your body so that your food becomes useful, it's used, which is called assimilation. Remember now, enzymes involved in chemical digestion are sensitive to changes in temperature and pH and only work in an optimum temperature and pH range. So you learned last week that enzymes can denature, okay? Enzymes can denature. So if you have a temperature, for example, you're sick, your temperature is supposed to be 37.5, but suddenly you're sick and you have a fever and your temperature goes to 40, 42. Why is it dangerous? Because all the enzymes that's supposed to break down your large molecules into small molecules, they will denature, they will lose their shape. It's like taking a key and melting it. It will never open that door lock again because it changed its shape. So when you expose enzymes to very, very high temperature, they change their shape. It's called denaturing. And they won't be able to react with your food and break down them into smaller pieces. And then also, enzymes are not only sensitive to temperature, they're also sensitive to the pH. pH means your acid-alkali value. So in the mouth, we have a neutral. We have a neutral pH medium. In the stomach, we have an acidic pH medium. So the enzymes in the stomach will only work in the stomach because that's where they're suited to work. And that is your certain proteases, certain enzymes that break, like your renin and pepsin. Pepsin that breaks down proteins, renin that curdles the milk. Né? So those only work in the stomach because they're sensitive to a pH of 2 to 5. They only work in that medium. pH of 2 to 5 is an acidic medium. Your bile, it doesn't produce enzymes, but it emulsifies fats. And they can only work in an alkali medium, which is in your duodenum. Your pancreatic juice, which secretes enzymes, they can only work in the duodenum where it's alkali. Alkali means between 8 to 14. They will only work there. Okay, so if you take an enzyme from the stomach and put it in the intestine, it won't work. If you take an enzyme from the intestine and put it in the stomach, it won't work because you change the pH. Okay, now here you can see that enzymes are protein. What is an enzyme? It's a chemical, but what kind of a chemical? Is it a fat? Is it a sugar? Is it a protein? Is it a vitamin? No, an enzyme is a protein that helps to speed up metabolism. Remember, we learned about metabolism, the building up and the breaking down of molecules. Né? When you take many glucose molecules and join them like coaches of a train, it will form glycogen and starch. If you take the starch and you break it down again into glucose, remember that's catabolic. Catabolic means breaking it down from large to smaller. It's catabolic. Take the small ones and join them into something bigger. It's anabolic. So your anabolic and catabolic reactions together, it's called metabolism. And they are responsible for the chemical reactions in our body. Enzymes do that. Enzymes break down and build up molecules. That chemical reaction, right, leads to what we call metabolism. Right. So now chemical digestion, you can see here a substrate. What is a substrate? It is the substance with which an enzyme reacts. So your enzyme is reacting with that substance. The part where the enzyme joins with the substrate is called an active site. Can you see? Here's your substrate. Let's say, for example, this can be starch. That enzyme is salivary amylase. Your starch molecule, which is your substrate, joined at that active site, that main part, to your enzyme. So it's called an enzyme substrate complex. It's like it works like a lock and key. Your key is your enzyme. Your door lock, né, is your substrate. Now, if you change the shape of your lock, your key, it won't work on the lock. Okay, so they have to fit at that particular point. You can't take the key and just go to any part of the door and open it. The key has to fit in that particular point. So that point where the enzyme and the substrate meet is called the active site, and together, the lock and the key together is called the enzyme substrate complex. And then the enzyme will react. See, it's reacting with the green molecule. Now it formed two parts. So it broke down. It broke down. the substrate into a product, and you can see now we have two parts. So a starch molecule can be broken down into two glucose molecules. You see? Or a fat, the substrate can be a fat. The enzyme can be a lipase, which breaks down fats. The lipase enzyme works with the lipid, which is the fat, and breaks it down into fatty acids and glycerol. That's a product. You can see one thing is broken down into two. So that's a catabolic reaction. Let us look at some of the things involved in your chemical digestion. Now here we have, for example, a protein is made up of many amino acids. You see, you can get different proteins, different amino. So these are all different amino acids. Amino acid 1, 2, 3. Look at the different shapes, different colors, meaning every one is an amino acid, and they all joined by peptide bonds, which you have learned in grade 10. So here, the enzyme that breaks down a protein, see, protease. So protease breaks down proteins to amino acid. So that is, so all the enzymes that break down your meat, fish, chicken, eggs, beans, lentils, those are proteins. Soya, those are proteins. All enzymes that break down proteins are grouped as proteases, and they break down protein, and they form your amino acids. See how all of them now are going to be broken down, and they all become simple units. Then you have starch in your bread or your rice. Here's all the glucose molecules joined to form your starch. Starch is what? A carbohydrate. So all the enzymes that break down your rice, cold drink, your sugar in your chocolate, your bread. So all those foods are called carbohydrates. So the group of enzymes that break down carbohydrates are called carbohydrases. Carbohydrases break down carbohydrates into glucose. See? Then a fat. Your fat is your cream, all the cream in the milk, in your ice cream, the cream in the fat in the cheese, the fat in on the chops, right? So all that fatty things that you eat, your butter, your margarine, they are all called lipids. Now all your lipids, the enzymes that break down lipids of fat are called lipase. So lipase breaks down fats into what? Fatty acids and glycerol. Fatty acids and glycerol. So learners, this is very important for you to know. Every day you eat food, you need to know what is happening to the food. What am I eating? How is it broken down? What breaks it down? So whenever you eat food, before you put it in the mouth, think about what are you doing? What is going to happen? What happens to that life of the food after you take it into your mouth? Okay, so let's say, for example, now you are having a bread sandwich, you put butter on it, and you put a slice of polony on it. Your polony is your protein. Your margarine is your fat. And your bread is your carbohydrate. So your protein, but the polony will be broken down by proteases into amino acids. Your bread, which is a carbohydrate, will be broken down by carbohydrates into glucose. And your lipids will be which is a fat, will be broken down by lipase into fatty acids and glycerol. So remember, these are the building blocks of the large molecules. Glucose is the building blocks of starch and carbohydrates. Fatty acids and glycerol is the building blocks of fat. Amino acids are the building blocks of a protein. And now we can put them into a table to see exactly what enzymes break down what and where are the enzymes found and what pH medium do they actually work in. So here you can see now the group of enzymes, right, where are they produced? So your carbohydrate enzymes, they are produced in the saliva. Where is saliva found? In the mouth. What produces saliva? Salivary glands. Underneath your tongue, look at your tongue in the mirror, lift your tongue up and you'll see little like softish glands under your tongue. That's your salivary glands. And they produce saliva so your mouth is not dry. You can talk. But if you don't have saliva, you cannot talk. If you don't have saliva, you cannot mix your food. If you don't have saliva, you cannot swallow your food. If you don't have saliva, you don't have salivary amylase, which breaks down your starch, your carbohydrate. So saliva is found in the mouth. It has salivary amylase, which is responsible for chemical digestion. So saliva breaks down your carbohydrates like starch. Then you have your pancreatic juice, which contains amylase, okay? It's also part of a carbohydrate. So pancreatic juice also has a carbohydrate. It's going to break down your carbohydrates. Intestine, your small intestine, also have carbohydrates that breaks down all your bread, your starches as well. Then we have proteases, coming from the word protein. It breaks down all your proteins. So where am I going to have proteases? I don't have any protease in the mouth. I'm going to have protease in the stomach. I'll have protease in the pancreatic juice. I'll have proteases in the intestinal juice. What do proteases do? Break down proteins. Lipase works with lipids. Lipids are known as fats. Where will I find lipase? I don't have it in the saliva. So there's no fats that is broken down in the mouth. I don't have any lipase in the duodenum. In your stomach. Right? So where will I find lipase now? I'll find lipase in my pancreatic juice and intestinal juice. So lipids, fats are broken down in your intestine by the pancreatic juice that comes from the pancreas and your intestinal juice. So no fats are broken down in the mouth and no fats are broken down in the stomach. But carbohydrates are broken down where? Carbohydrates are broken down in the mouth, not in the stomach, and they continue to be broken down in your intestine. Right. So remember, carbohydrates work on the substrate called carbohydrates. Carbohydrates works on the substrate called carbohydrates. Proteases work on the substrate called proteins. Lipase works on the substrate called lipids. Right. You may remember now, learners, that in the mouth it's slightly alkali. In the stomach it's acidic. And you find that in your intestine it's very, very alkali. So the end product of carbohydrates is glucose. The end product of proteins is amino acids. The end product of lipids is fatty acids and glycerol. End product of proteins is amino acid. End product of starch or carbohydrate is glucose. Right. Then to summarize, where exactly or what type of a medium does saliva have? It has a alkali, neutral to slightly alkali. Stomach, acidic. Intestine, alkali. Right. Now let's go to more the same thing. Let's just look at it again. Other chemicals include pancreatic juice, gastric juice, and bile. Now we came across a new juice. We said there are chemical juices which have enzymes that break down food. Breaking down of food is called digestion. Digestion starts in the mouth. What is the juice in the mouth? Saliva. What is the juice in the stomach? Gastric juice. So the juice in the stomach is like a juice, a liquid in the stomach which has enzymes. It's called gastric juice. That one has a pH of between 2 to 5. It's acidic. So gastric juice is acidic. Bile juice is alkali, made by the liver, produced by the gallbladder. And the pancreatic juice is produced by the pancreas. So we have, what are the juices or digestive juices in the digestive system? Your saliva, then goes your gastric juice in the stomach, then your bile juice from the gallbladder, then your pancreatic juice. Okay. So gastric juice contains enzymes, protease, as well as hydrochloric acid. Now, the food that's in the stomach is very, very acidic. That's where you get a gastric reflux. It burns because the food that comes up from the stomach is going up. If you overeat, you find you'll have a heartburn because your stomach is just as small as a fist. But if you're eating a whole lot of food very fast, your stomach can't take it. You're pushing more food down than what the stomach can have space for. So it's obviously going to push the food up because there isn't enough space. So when it moves up with the hydrochloric acid, and that causes the burning sensation. Right. So the juice in the stomach is called hydrochloric acid. Nah? It has hydrochloric acid. It's water with acid and enzymes. And that together is called gastric juice. Gastro deals with the stomach. So gastric juice has enzymes called proteases. They break down your proteins. It also has hydrochloric acid. Acid also breaks down the protein. The hydrochloric acid also acts as an antiseptic. Remember, if you put acid like Coke has a lot of acid in it, phosphoric acid. Try to put Coke onto anything. You see how it bubbles? It kills the germs as well. So hydrochloric acid acts as an antiseptic. Remember, even bile acts as an antiseptic. It kills the germs found in food. Then you have your pancreatic juice again. We said it goes into the duodenum. And what makes something alkali? It's called sodium bicarbonate. Learners, that's very important. That bile and pancreatic juice and the intestinal juice, bile juice, pancreatic juice, and intestinal juice contains what we call sodium bicarbonate. Okay, it's called what? Sodium bicarbonate. And this sodium bicarbonate is actually alkali. And they neutralize the acid in the food. So if you take an alkali and pour it into an acid, it neutralizes the food so that the food doesn't burn as it's moving down the intestine. So in this slide, it's showing you two juices. Pancreatic juice is alkali, gastric juice is acidic. What gives the gastric juice an acidic medium is a hydrochloric acid. What gives your pancreatic juice and your bile an alkali medium? It's your sodium bicarbonate. Why do we need pancreatic juice and bile juice to be poured from the food that comes from the stomach? So it can neutralize the acid food coming from the stomach. So here are some questions now. This is the actual digestive system now. You see, here is your tongue, here is your salivary gland, and then what's going to happen is this is going to be your food pipe here. Your esophagus, which is A, is your esophagus. B is your stomach. C is your pancreas. D will be your small intestine. E is actually your rectum. It's called the rectum. E is called the rectum. That's the last part where your undigested food stays. And when it builds up, it gives you the urge that you need to go to the toilet to empty out the undigested food, which is called defecation. And this opening at the end here, that is called the anus, which allows the undigested food to move out. So that is the anus, and you must have seen that in the earthworm, that even an earthworm has a mouth to take in food ingestion and has an anus to let food go out. That is egestion, and that's why we also have what we call a through gut. So this passage of food from the mouth, esophagus, stomach, going into the intestine, from intestine going into the large intestine, you see it's continuous. See, mouth, esophagus, stomach into the small intestine into the large intestine and out. That's the mainstream. And then all the other organs on the side, your pancreas, your gallbladder, your liver, are called what? Accessory organs. Your salivary glands are called what? Your accessory organs. Right. So let's look at the questions here. Write the letter of the part that stores bile. You look for the gallbladder. And they're asking for the letter. So you don't say gallbladder. You give the letter of the gallbladder. That is G. Write the letter of the part where most enzymes are active to digest food. Where are most enzymes active? You're going to find most enzymes are active in your D, which is your small intestine, because that's the longest part. longest part of the small intestine, longest part of the digestive system is the intestine, and because it's the longest, it will have the most enzymes, right? So that's D. Where most water and mineral salts are absorbed. So when you're drinking water, how does water get absorbed from your intestines? It gets absorbed from your large intestine. So this larger part here is called your large intestine. You learned about that last week. So from F is the large intestine. That's where your water gets absorbed. And you need to have fiber, which is your leafy vegetables, your carrots and cabbage, that acts bulk, so that it prevents constipation. Right. Again, which label structure secretes a hormone which causes an increased production of insulin? Which structure here will secrete a hormone which causes an increased production of insulin? Remember, if you have too much of glucose, then you must take the excess glucose and convert it into glycogen and store it in the liver. So the structure that's going to secrete a hormone will be your Z, your pancreas. Remember that. Right. Now, next one is, which label structure produces bile? It's going to be, bile is going to, which one produces bile? Learners, be very careful. It's so easy for you to say gallbladder. Bile is produced or manufactured by the liver, which is Y, but it is stored in the gallbladder. So if they say which label structure stores bile, it will be X. But which structure produces bile, it's going to be Y. That is the liver. And remember, the liver also stores glycogen. And who caused it to be stored there? Insulin. And what does it store? Excess glucose in the form of glycogen in the liver. But who causes it to be converted is insulin produced by the islets of Langerhans in the pancreas. Very important. It sounds difficult, but the more you go through your work and the more you write down and draw diagrams of what you're learning, you will remember it. Next question, which label structure deaminates excess amino acids? Remember, if you're eating too much of meat, too much of amino acids are formed. Which one is responsible for deamination? We said Y, the liver. Which label structure produces enzymes and hormones? Remember, we said Z. The pancreas is an exocrine and an endocrine gland. You're going to learn of that in grade 12. So it's Z. The enzymes are found where? In the pancreatic juice. The hormones are released where? From the islets of Langerhans. What were the hormones again? Insulin and glucagon. So the pancreas is an exo and an endocrine gland. I told you how to remember exocrine. Enzymes ZY, and exocrine got the letter X. Name 3 ways in which physical digestion takes place. Children, also remember that physical digestion means mechanical digestion. There's 2 types of digestion. Mechanical by the teeth and the muscles. Physical or chemical by the action of the teeth, chewing or mastication, and by the muscles. So muscles are involved in breaking down the food and churning it. The teeth in breaking it down. So that is called what? Physical or chemical digestion. So physical or mechanical digestion occurs by mastication, chewing of the food, when the stomach muscles contract and relax, muscles, churning, and when the food is pushed down, it also helps to break down the food as it's pushing it down. That's called peristalsis. So remember, physical digestion or mechanical digestion happens in 3 ways: mastication or chewing, muscles of the stomach mixing the food, and by the food moving down, which is called peristalsis. Briefly describe the process of peristalsis. Peristalsis is not disorderly. It's a very rhythmical contraction. One above the bolus circular muscle contract, then it relaxes, then contracts and relaxes, right? So it's a rhythmic contraction of the muscles in the alimentary canal. Another name for digestive system is alimentary canal. In the alimentary canal, above the food bolus, to push it along the canal. The muscles below the food bolus must relax to allow the food to continuously move along the canal. So all you have to say in a nutshell is peristalsis is a rhythmic contraction of the circular muscles where they contract and relax to push the food bolus down. Peristalsis is a rhythmical contraction of the muscles where they contract and relax to push the food bolus down to the stomach and intestines. Right. Absorption. Digested food is now in a soluble form. So now when food is absorbed, once it's broken down, it's now in a smallest and simple form. Once it's broken down, it's now simplified. And once it's simplified, it can dissolve in water and then it's absorbed in your bloodstream. So most absorption takes place in the small intestine because digestion has taken place by the time food has reached the small intestine. So food particles in the small intestine are small enough to be absorbed. All you need to know, learners, is that once you take food in and once it's broken down by mechanical and chemical digestion by enzymes, once that food is broken down by enzymes, it's small enough, then it's going to be absorbed. Where is absorption taking place? Small intestine. Right. Now we have two types of absorption. We have active absorption and passive absorption. For something to be active, it requires energy. Right? So this is when food must go now against the gradient. If you're moving from the bottom of the hill to the top, it's like you're moving against gravity. So you need energy to do that. Same thing with food. Right? So for glucose to move from your intestine into your blood, it is actively absorbed. But for something that doesn't need energy, they're just moving easily, like water. When water is absorbed in the large intestine, it is passively absorbed. It doesn't need energy because water is already in a simple form. It does not need to be simplified. But starch needs to be simplified to glucose. A big chunk of meat needs to be simplified to amino acids. A big fat needs to be simplified to fatty acids and glycerol. But water is simple, so it's just passively absorbed. It does not need energy. So water is passively absorbed, whereas your amino acids, your fatty acids, your glycerol, and your glucose, they need energy to be absorbed from your intestine to go into the blood. Now, your intestines, you can see how your intestines are sitting in your abdomen. And this is all your small intestines that are packed like that. Ne? They are folded, and they're very narrow and it's very long, almost 3.5 meters long. That is your small intestine. Your large intestine could be about maybe 1.5 meters long. That is your large intestine where water is absorbed. So the small intestine, although it's narrow, it has a large surface area. Because it's narrow, the food it's in close contact with the food. Okay, they're saying it's approximately 6 meters long. Okay, in children it will be smaller, but in an adult it will be, say, 6 meters long. That's very, very long. Okay, the length of the small intestine, why must it be so long? It's narrow, that's why it's small, but it's long so that it gives enough time, sufficient time for maximum absorption. So if it was short, the food will just go from the mouth to the stomach, intestine, and out. You won't get, that means you're not going to get anything out of the food you're eating. So you remember, food gives you nutrition, your vitamins, your calcium, your magnesium, your iron. So if it's long, it will stay there, giving enough time to enzymes to break down, then absorb it, then go into the blood, and for your cells to use it. When your cells use the food that you've eaten, it's called assimilation. So here's your small intestine. And you can see here's your esophagus, which is a food pipe that brings down food to the stomach, which has gastric juice. Goes to the first part of the small intestine called the duodenum, where the pancreatic juice and bile react to neutralize the food coming from the stomach, right? Remember, the stomach was churning the food, mixing it with the acid to kill the germs. It moves into the small intestine, and the enzymes, your carbohydrates, your proteases, your lipases, break down all the food, and then it gets absorbed by the intestine to the hepatic portal vein, and then your undigested food stays in the colon. What's not absorbed goes into the colon or your large intestine, comes to the rectum, and then out to the anus. All right, now you can see inside the intestine. So when they do a scope and they look inside the intestine, you see a whole lot of these finger-like projections. Let's magnify the finger-like projections. It's called a villus. This is the villus. One villus. On the villus surface, they got a smaller little finger-like structures called microvilli. So that's a villus. It's finger-like. It has a blood vessel to absorb the food. Absorb your glucose, your water, your vitamins. It absorbs your fatty acids, your glycerol. See, all these villi. These are called villi, and they help to absorb food. So here, it's basically, if you cut your small intestine open, you see that there's millions of villi, finger-like projections in the small intestine, which increase the surface area for absorption, to mean that every little bit of food that you eat must be absorbed so that you can function. This is now a micrograph. So when they do a scope and they take a photograph, this is what your intestine looks like inside. All these little structures here are busy absorbing food. Okay, now when people pass feces into the sea, when the sewage leaks into the rivers and dams, and that Escherichia coli gets in there, and you drink that water with the germs that comes from the stomach, comes from the sewage, that germ will eat up all this villi, and then your stomach is going to work all the time until you cannot absorb food because everything comes out. So we must learn not to pollute our rivers. Right. So the soluble nutrients mainly absorbed through the villi. So all your amino acids are broken down. They were broken down from proteins. Amino acids are soluble. Proteins are insoluble. They're too big. So your proteases break down the proteins to amino acids. Now they're soluble. Now they'll be absorbed through the villi. Your fats are insoluble. They're too large. Your lipase will break fats into fatty acids and glycerol. Fatty acids and glycerol are soluble. They'll be absorbed into the villus. And every villus has what we call a microvilli, even smaller little projections. Okay. Here is the structure of the villus. They normally test it in the exams. You need to know how to draw the diagram. You need to know the labels of the diagram. So this is just one single layer of cells on the outside of the villus. It's called your columnar epithelium. And then you also have little finest, like a brush border, called your microvilli. You also have inside this, in between these cells, a goblet cell which secretes mucus so your food can slide. So this is what epithelium? Columnar. In between, there's some goblet cells. They secrete mucus so your food can slide during peristalsis. When your intestine is contracting and relaxing and pushing the food down, then it must move easily without bruising or having friction. So the goblet cells secrete mucus for food to slide down easily during peristalsis. Here's your blood vessels. The blue one is a vein which takes your food to your liver, to your hepatic portal vein. The red one is an artery. The artery is also a blood vessel that's going to take food to as well away from your actually the artery is bringing food in, right? It's like that, arterial. It's also supplying oxygen to your villi, right? And then the food that's moving away from the villus is going to go to the liver. Now this green structure here is called a lacteal. It's not a blood vessel. It's what we call a lymph vessel. That one takes only fatty acids and glycerol. So what transports the absorbed fats? After you eat fat and it's broken down, where does the fat go in your small intestine? It goes into the lacteal of your villus. Everything else, your water, vitamins, glucose, and amino acids, gets into your blood capillaries, which is your red and blue. Okay. Again, the diagram of the villus, you see every single columnar cell here has what we call a mitochondria. Remember when we did respiration, we said that's the powerhouse. Mitochondria also need oxygen. So the arterioles coming from the heart supplies your intestine with oxygen and also supplies it with its own glucose, because the mitochondria here needs the oxygen and glucose to actively absorb the food. So when you're eating food, you're giving food also to your intestine to function. And you're also breathing in and the oxygen goes into your intestine, comes over the arteriole, and then all the mitochondria undergo respiration to produce energy so that you can absorb your food. So all this is what? Your villus. You can see the tiny microvilli on the side, so that every bit of food, microvilli, to increase the surface area for absorption. Your mitochondria is found inside that columnar epithelial cell, supplies energy for active absorption. Remember, we said there's two absorptions, active and passive. Active absorption, energy is required. Who gives the energy? Here's the mitochondria inside the columnar epithelial cell. Now, there's a lymph vessel. Remember, I talked about a lymph vessel. This one in the middle here, which was green on the other slide, it's called a lymph vessel. And that one is going to transport fats to a big duct here near your neck called the thoracic duct. It transports your fats to the thoracic duct. And your vein will transport your absorbed glucose and amino acids and take it to the liver. Again, you're seeing this is a micrograph. Under the microscope, you can see the structure of the villus. All those black dots are the mitochondria supplying energy for active absorption. Here again, you're seeing the same thing. It's your villus. How is it structurally suited? Finger-like, so food can be absorbed on this side and that side. They sway. They busy sway, so food moves over and above, all of them, as the food is moving down. So the food moves like that. So in every angle, the food can get absorbed. Remember, it's already simplified now. Enzymes broke it down. Now they simply need to go over, and then they're absorbed. Where they absorbed? Into the vein, into these blue capillaries. The blue structure is called a capillary. Yes, they're absorbing it. Because energy is needed, it's called active absorption. Lymph vessel transports fatty acids and glycerol, and your vein is transporting your glucose and amino acid, and this is called an arteriole. It's supplying the actual villus with glucose and oxygen for it to do its work. Glycerol and fatty acids are the end products of lipids. I told you that fats are broken down into what? Fatty acids and glycerol. And that fatty acids and glycerol gets absorbed into the lacteal. So here's your fatty acids and glycerol. This is your fat, which is a triglyceride. It's broken down by enzyme lipase into fatty acids and glycerol, and they get absorbed into the lacteal. But your blood capillary absorbs glucose and amino acid. Again, the same thing here now. Vitamins are fat soluble. Remember, you have vitamins and mineral salts, right? Now, they are already soluble. They can dissolve easily. So, they are passively absorbed. They don't need energy. Mineral salts also. Mineral salts are actively and passively absorbed into the blood capillaries. But water is absorbed by osmosis. So, water is passively absorbed. We've spoken about this earlier, that glucose is the simple molecule that comes from the breakdown of carbohydrates, and they absorbed into the blood capillaries, that blue structure. Amino acids are coming from the breakdown of proteins by proteases. They also absorbed into the blood capillary. Now we have a summary here that absorption can be active or passive. Remember, where does absorption take place? So glucose is actively absorbed into the blood capillary. Amino acids are actively absorbed into the blood capillary. Glycerol and fatty acids are passively absorbed because they go into the lacteal. They're already soluble because bile makes it soluble. And because bile makes the fatty acids and glycerol soluble, they'll simply move in by diffusion into the lacteal. That's why they call passive absorption. They don't need energy. Vitamins are passively and actively absorbed, okay, into the blood capillary. So some minerals are actively absorbed. If they're not soluble, they'll be actively absorbed. If they're soluble, they will simply move into the blood capillary passively, and water is always passively absorbed into the blood capillary. Right, the transport of amino acids and glucose. Now, learners, we've already discussed all of it. We said amino acids and glucose are absorbed into the blood capillaries of the intestine. Then they will go into the vein, the blue part, to the hepatic portal vein. Remember I showed you the hepatic portal vein at the beginning? It will go to the liver. And in the liver, what happens? We said glucose and amino acids go by the hepatic portal vein, from the hepatic portal vein to the heart. Then the liver will convert excess glucose to glycogen and store it. The excess amino acids are deaminated by the liver to form urea. So remember, all the slide is saying that when you break down carbohydrates to glucose, the glucose will go by the hepatic portal vein from the intestine to the liver. Excess glucose in the liver will be stored as glycogen by insulin. When you're having too much of proteins like meat and it's broken down to amino acids, the excess amino acids will go to the liver and be deaminated to form urea. And the urea will then go from the liver to the heart, from the heart to the kidney, and the kidney filters out the urea as part of your urine. So that's what the pathway of our food is. Here you can see how your lungs and your heart and your kidneys work together. That's why when the problem is with the heart, with the lungs, the heart gets affected. If the heart gets affected, the kidney gets affected. Okay, so remember learners, here all it's trying to tell you is that when the food enters your digestive system, your mouth and then your intestine and goes to the liver, from the liver the food is taken by the hepatic vein to the heart. Ne? The heart will pump all the food, all your vitamins, your water, your amino acids, your fatty acids, your glycerol. It's going to pump it where? To your lungs. Your lungs will take the food plus your oxygen and transfer it to all parts of the body. Okay? So eventually, all parts of your body is going to get what? Glucose and oxygen for respiration. So remember, the remaining glucose and amino acids leave the liver by the hepatic vein, transported by the inferior vena cava to the heart and to the rest of the body. A large portion of glucose is transported to the tissues, especially the muscles, where it's broken down by respiration to produce, oxygen is needed, and it produces CO2 and water with the release of energy. So remember learners, when we are breaking in oxygen via the lungs, that oxygen from the lungs must go to the heart. The heart will pump oxygen to all cells where it's going to be used for respiration to give you energy. When you're eating food like your bread and your carbohydrates, the heart will pump all that food eventually to all the cells where it will use the glucose for respiration in the mitochondria to give you energy so your organs can work. Fatty acids and glycerol are absorbed by the lacteal. We said that. Lacteals form a large lymphatic vessel, you see. So your lacteals from all your villi join to form what we call a thoracic duct. All right. And then the thoracic duct is like, here's your thoracic duct. So here's your lacteal from your villus. And all the lacteals will come and open and into a thoracic duct. Thoracic duct. And then your thoracic duct will open into a main vein, right? And eventually opens up into the main hepatic vein, and then that one takes it away actually it goes into the inferior vena cava and takes it to the heart. So all your fats will eventually move from your lymph system or your lymphatic system, and it goes into your blood system. So remember, fats are traveling via the lymph vessel or lacteals, lymph vessel, lymphatic system, thoracic duct, and then it gets into the blood. It's the same thing again, fatty acids and glycerol in the thoracic duct into the bloodstream at the left subclavian vein and are transported to the rest of the body via the heart. Eventually, the subclavian vein will join with the inferior vena cava. You did that in grade 10, remember? So all this slide is telling you that is that fatty acids and glycerol go from the lacteal into the lymph vessel. The lymph vessel enters into the thoracic duct. The thoracic duct will go into the subclavian vein. Vein is part of the blood system. The subclavian vein goes to the inferior vena cava and pumps the fat to all parts of the body. Now here, this is the line diagram of the villus. This is what appears in the exam. You can see these hair-like structures here can be called microvilli. Right, here is a goblet cell. That's a E is a goblet cell which secretes mucus. You can see C is a blood capillary. You can see that this one's coming in. It's an arteriole. It's coming to the villus. This one leaving is a vein. It's going to take away the absorbed food. So which structure is represented here? This is a finger-like structure called the villus. One villus, many villi. State the main function of the above structure. It absorbs all your digested food. Explain 2 reasons why this structure is so efficient in its function. This one you must learn, you must know it, learners. That first of all, why is this structure efficient to absorb food? It has blood vessels and lacteals to transport. They must, if you absorb something, you must transport it. So this villus has what? A lacteal to transport fatty acids and glycerol, and a blood capillary to transport your absorbed amino acids and your glucose and your vitamins. Secondly, these goblet cells secrete mucus to keep it moist so that food can be absorbed faster. If food is dry or if the surface is dry, it cannot be absorbed. So remember, it has mucus which is supplied by the goblet cells for better diffusion of the food. It has microvilli to increase the surface area for absorption. The columnar epithelium is not thick, it's just a single layer of cells so that the food can be absorbed very fast. And all the villi are in close contact with the food for maximum absorption. And remember that each columnar cell has a mitochondria to supply it with energy for active absorption. So any of those 5 reasons, any 2 of those tells you how the villus is efficiently used for absorption. Name 2 substances which are found in higher concentration in C than in D. First of all, remember C is food that is absorbed. So food coming in here, this one will have less glucose. But when you leave the intestine, it's going to have more glucose. So you find in C, there'll be large amounts of glucose and amino acids because C is a vein which is transporting the absorbed food. Okay, so C is going to have large amounts. And the 2 substances that will be large amounts will be amino acids and glucose. Label parts A and E. A is what? Now A here can be pointing to the microvilli, or you could say it's the goblet, the columnar epithelial cell. Okay, so they, it looks like the microvilli, but if they put it a little further there, that's a columnar epithelium. Then B, E, this indentation here is your goblet cell which secretes mucus. Briefly explain the function of structure B. Remember, B in the center is your lacteal. And what does the lacteal do? It absorbs glycerol and fatty acids and transports it where? To the thoracic duct. So absorbs fatty acids and glycerol, remember? And who made the fat to be broken down easily and to emulsified was bile salts. Bile salts actually assist the fatty acids and glycerol to be absorbed into the lacteal. This is an activity whereby you can just look at it here now. Same thing what we've done before. The glucose is actively absorbed into the blood capillary. It's just consolidating everything. Amino acids need energy. They're actively absorbed into the blood capillary. Fatty acids and glycerol, because of bile salts, they'll be passively absorbed into the lacteal. Bile salts assist in the diffusion of the fatty acid into the lacteal. Vitamins are actively and passively absorbed into the blood capillary, minerals into the blood. So the only thing that you see that's not absorbed into the blood capillary in the villus is the fatty acids and glycerol. It goes into the lacteal. But eventually, how does the fatty acids and glycerol get into the bloodstream? When the lacteal, see the lacteal from the villus, which is a lymph vessel, will all join to go into the thoracic duct. And from the thoracic duct, it's going to go into the subclavian vein. And the subclavian vein will enter into your inferior vena cava, which goes into the heart. All right. And learners, that is the end of the lesson. Please remember, there's a lot of terminology that you've learned of, but if you associate the terminology with the diagrams, you will be fine. So every time you associate a terminology, look at the diagram, and that's how you're going to remember. Make mind maps of everything around the digestive system. Thank you.